first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4757. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4757, an act relating to cannabis. Number 1 on the calendar for the day, the second engrossment.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson, to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is the cannabis omnibus bill. You know, last year when we passed the cannabis legalization bill, I made the comment repeatedly that it had been 100 years since we had ended the prohibition on alcohol, and we were still making changes to our liquor laws. And in fact, this body earlier this week passed some changes to our state's liquor laws. And so it's not surprising that we would be back a year later with some changes and clarifications on the landmark cannabis legislation that we passed last year. I'm sure we're going to have a good discussion. There's a lot of amendments. I'll just be briefly highlighting a few of the important provisions in the bill. There's a number of provisions in this bill designed to expedite the process of setting up a good, legitimate marketplace for cannabis, to displace that illicit marketplace that's out there. Number 1, we accelerate transfer of enforcement divisions out of the Department of Health and into the Office of Cannabis Management, particularly related to medical cannabis, but also those low-dose hemp-derived products. By transferring these entities over to OCM sooner, we will have more robust enforcement in the near term and have a more stable marketplace in the long term. Secondly, we establish a pre-approval process that as early as this summer will allow for people to know that they're going to eventually get a license, which will allow those people to take the steps necessary to line up capital, secure real estate, do all of those things knowing that they will have a license down the road, which will effectuate a faster startup once those licenses actually issue. We also do make a number of clarification changes, particularly around packaging, around serving of THC products on sale, and around workplace testing. We make some important improvements to our medicinal cannabis program, including an important bill from Chair Herr that allows any doctor to recommend cannabis as treatment for any medical condition, moving us away from that very limited list that has controlled our medical cannabis program since its inception about a decade ago. The bill also includes important provisions authored by Representative Hansen related to registered caregivers, making sure that registered caregivers are able to actually provide the medicinal cannabis to the people that they're working with. Lastly, it makes some changes to how we have licenses awarded. This has been interpreted in the press as moving from a point-based system to a lottery system, or a merit-based system to a lottery system. And I'll just clarify at the beginning that that's overstated. There is a lottery in both existing law and in this proposal. There is merit assessments both in existing law and in this proposal. The difference is in how you get there, and I'm sure we'll have a good discussion about that today. And so with that, Madam Speaker, I know there are amendments.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File number 4757, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A17.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, this amendment adds to the duties of the Advisory Council. And if you look on that amendment, it includes studying the impact of legalized adult use cannabis on the rate of cannabis use by minors. And I think this is an important element to add to the duties of the Advisory Council. I don't know if it's made its way around the room yet or not, but there's just this week, on the 16th this week, which was what, Tuesday? Yep. Tuesday, Fox 9 had a piece regarding cannabis use of minors, and they interviewed a counselor from Hazelden. And a lot of her quotes are on this piece that is being passed out right now. But one of the things that this counselor says is, we've seen an increase of individuals using cannabis as young as 13 years old. We've seen patients come in with cannabis use disorder. And cannabis use disorder, as she explains it, is when daily life is impacted negatively, or in more serious cases, they're now seeing psychosis, or CHS, which is cannabis hyperemesis syndrome that can develop. We're seeing a lot more aggression, specifically associated with the cannabis users' tiredness. I hear a lot of procrastination from patients that are unable to get tasks done. And what they're interviewing these young people and what they're saying is, well, I'm a, okay, oh, I'm sorry. This is the audit trail. No. No, I'm talking to the wrong amendment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The A17, thank you. Well, there's the preface for what's coming later. Representative Stevenson, thank you for visiting with me about the audit trail language. What's happening, members, is the medical cannabis program is going over to the new and inexperienced in dealing with medical record Office of Cannabis Management. And so this just would try to put some safeguards there by having some audit trails, and I would encourage members' support.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Scott, and thank you for your work on the A17 amendment about audit trails, which I think we should vote yes on. So I'd encourage members for a yes on the A17. I think we will shortly be taking up the amendment you described a minute ago, the A26. And just to, since you talked about it, I will too, and say that it's a good amendment that members should vote yes on as well. So when we get to that amendment, I'll be encouraging a yes vote. But please vote yes on the A17.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House Law number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A26.
To the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
I'm not going to repeat myself, folks. Hopefully you heard the arguments before, and I would encourage members' support.
Representative Stevenson.
Oh, Chair.
As I said earlier, members, please vote yes.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Law number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A14.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A14 amendment deletes the 18-month the extension you can get on the 18 months if you get a license. Currently, in this bill, they do the lottery, you get your license, and after you get selected in that lottery, you have 18 months to utilize it. I'd argue that's too much time already, but it also has a provision that says if you make a good faith effort, that could be extended. Now, I don't think we should be allowing that to be extended beyond the 18 months. If you can't do it in 18 months, you probably can't do it at all. And we should discontinue that so we can clear a license spot for an individual who can actually get their business up and running and operate. And members, I urge your support.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative West, for bringing the amendment. I encourage members to vote yes. I think Representative West is right that 18 months should be good enough.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Law number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A21.
To the author of the amendment, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the bill currently, in the pre-approval lottery process, you can have your application retained if you are not selected at your request, and then it'll be in the next lottery. This bill also extends that courtesy to the standard lottery. But one thing that I don't think is clear in the bill, not sure which way it is do you have to pay another license fee and application fee? And those application fees are quite substantial, so this clarifies that if you do retain your name in the lottery to the next lottery, you will not have to pay that license fee again. Members, I urge your support.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative West. I'm going to encourage a yes vote on this amendment today, but note a little bit that yes is with some reservations. There's, in a lottery system, one concern is the possibility of straw applicants sort of gumming up the works, and removing any fee for subsequent entries in the lottery could only enhance that problem. But I think that this is a good idea to at least do a species of this, and so I'm encouraging a yes vote today, and then we'll continue to talk about this idea when we take the bill to conference.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Bill number 4757, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A22.
To the author of the amendment, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Currently in the bill, the author claims that the bill accelerates the ability to get a safe and legal market operating. But that pre-approval process that is in the bill currently does not allow for any actual operations to take place. It merely goes, hey, you will get a license one day, congratulations. But you cannot start working, can't actually start to operate your business. And that's a big deal, because when this bill was passed last year, cannabis legalization, the anticipation was we would be starting operations in Q1 2025. And that's important because also in that bill, they legalized possession for everyone. 2 ounces in your person, 2 pounds in your house. And that's concerning because when you legalize possession, but there's nowhere legal to get the product, that just feeds the black market. And it's impossible to stop because possession is legal. So the current situation right now, the black market is running amok. It is proliferating to an insane degree, and that's not right. We need good people operating in good faith as real businesses to be creating a safe and regulated market. So what we need in order to have a safe and regulated market is cultivation to start as soon as possible, because you cannot have a retail store unless you have product to sell. As it stands right now, I would be surprised if we have a functioning market in 2026 if we maintain what we have right now. The rulemaking process alone can take a year or more. So people are out there, they can possess cannabis, but there's no legal place to buy it. So this bill does accelerate slightly the ability to actually start a business. But we need it to actually allow people to cultivate. Because if you don't have product, you cannot sell product. So what this amendment does, it sets a deadline for when the Office of Cannabis needs to distribute licenses related to cultivation. And it allows the director of the Office of Cannabis to create guidelines by policy. And you say, well, wait, do we want just one person setting these guidelines? Well, right now, there are over 100,000 square feet of canopy growing cannabis today. There has been no problems with that. It has been fine. We have rules related to that in law right now. And that's from the medical cannabis companies. So we already have guidelines and rules on how to grow cannabis. We've already been, well, we're the 23rd or something like that state to legalize. The idea that there are no rules for people to actually cultivate is ridiculous, because there are. So we should allow people to cultivate as soon as possible, because right now the black market is running amok. And the longer we let that happen, the more entrenched it will become. And Madam Speaker, I believe I have an amendment to the amendment.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
West moves to amend the West Amendment to House File Number 4757, the second Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded amendment to amendment is coded A30.
Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this amendment's very exciting. It just moves the dates up a couple months. When I was talking to some people about this amendment, a very wise person told me, you know what, let's move those dates up. And I said, all right, let's do it. I urge member support.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. And I encourage members to support your amendment to the amendment, and frankly think we could go even sooner than that, and maybe we'll talk about that in conference committee. But I support the amendment to the amendment and would encourage members to support it as well.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Stevenson moves to amend the West Amendment as amended to House File Number 4757, the second Grossman as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A28.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative West's underlying amendment really does three things. It sets deadlines for the pre-approval lottery. It delineates how many licenses will be in the pre-approval lottery. And then it third directs that the office put out temporary guidelines that would allow for cultivation. I support the first two things, but think the third one would actually set us back. So Representative West said a minute ago that rulemaking can take up to a year, and it's true that rulemaking is an intensive process. What's important to know is the office has already started that process of rulemaking and started it several months ago. We also gave them expedited rulemaking authority when we passed the bill last year. I think having multiple sets of rules, the current medical rules, these temporary rules, the official rules, will sow confusion and will distract the office away from getting the actual rules out the door as quickly as possible, which I agree with Representative West is an imperative. So what this amendment to the amendment does is delete that temporary guideline part of his amendment, and my intention would be to encourage members to accept the rest of the amendment.
Discussion. Representative West.
The chair's amendment to my amendment really, I mean, it does something, but it takes away the delicious, gooey center of the amendment that makes it truly worth doing. The idea that it's not going to interfere with rules and it's not going to be confusing. Because what is confusing is, say you have a scoring system in a bill for a year and then you change that to a lottery. Or you allow these businesses to sell flower, and then suddenly the next day you tell them they can't sell flower. You tell them they can sell vapes, then you pass a bill on an immediate enactment date, and suddenly they can't sell vapes anymore. That is legitimately confusing. But the idea that there's going to be confusion from the rules that medical providers, medical cultivators grow compared to what the future adult use cultivators, if anything, the rules will be less stringent, I imagine, because when you're dealing with a medical product, obviously, it's very, 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 very important to be exact, because it's literally being prescribed by a doctor. The idea that this would slow it down or be confusing is, I don't think it does at all. It allows basically the director of cannabis to do what we already know what needs to be done. Again, many, many, many states have done this already. So we have people who, when the law was passed last year, they already realized, like, okay, I see all these things I need to abide by. I'm going to go and start working on this. And those people have made investments, and they're going. And, you know, they knew that there was some risk to those investments, but we should help them get started right away. And if we take away the ability in this amendment to actually get early cultivation started, we're preventing a safe and legal market from operating. And because you need something to sell, you can't open a retail store unless there's been cultivation. So we have to get that started immediately, as soon as possible, which this bill, you know, I understand immediately might be a little aggressive, so we have some dates in here, which I would love to move up. But the longer we allow the black market to thrive, the more difficult it will be for these new businesses to succeed. Because Well, why would I bother going to a retail store when Buddy Freddy has got me hooked up forever and he has a sweet grow operation and it's all just fine? No, we need actual businesses to get operating as soon as possible. That's what this amendment does. And so this amendment to that amendment kills the best part of that. And I don't think that's what, especially a lot of people on your side of the aisle, I don't think that's what they are expecting. They expect you to share their enthusiasm for getting a safe and legal market up and running. And now we're all, I mean, it's already quarter one, 2025 is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. With this bill, oh, yay, pre-approval, but pre-approval to admire the problem. You can't actually operate your business. And it'll still delay things even more and also create a supply problem if we don't get up and running. There just won't be enough supply. And that is true in every single state. There has been a significant undersupply at the beginning. And these problems, you know, you might not care about cannabis businesses, and that's fine, but these problems allow the black market to thrive. And that is a problem, because that's where people get in trouble. That's where people have real consequences. So I would urge members to vote no on this amendment to the amendment, because we can't delay cultivation any longer. I'm surprised that the left side of the aisle would be approaching it from that sense, because this was a big priority of your caucus. So I urge members to vote red on this amendment to the amendment so we can ensure real, reputable businesses can get up and running, so we can keep Minnesotans who choose to use cannabis safe, and then we can have a smooth market launch. Because, you know, a lot of people are going to be pretty embarrassed, if, myself included, honestly, if we get to retail sales and it's a complete and utter disaster. So members, vote red, and Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Any further discussion to the Stevenson amendment to the amendment? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Have all members who wish to vote voted? Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely?
There you go.
Carroll, yes.
Carroll votes aye. Daniels.
Daniels votes no.
Daniels votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 yeas and 54 nays, the motion prevails, and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the underlying bill, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I'm sad we lost the good part of the amendment. At least this amendment now does set deadlines for the department to get to work and make this happen. It does surprise me, and I know you're going to hear from a lot of disappointed people, that cultivation has to start before legal sales. And the longer it waits, the worse this is going to get. But this amendment still is an improvement to the bill, and I urge members' support.
Further discussion to the A22 amendment. There being no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kosnick moves to amend House Bill number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A23.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Dakota, Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this amendment helps your local cities if they choose. They are not required, but if they choose to participate in being a license holder and helping to regulate the sales within their own municipality, it provides them an easier opportunity to have a retail license, and so I encourage your support.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Stevenson moves to amend the Kosnick amendment to House Bill number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A29.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Kosnick, for bringing this amendment. Much like the last amendment, this amendment does a couple of things. So the first thing it does is it ensures that if a municipality wants to open a cannabis business, that they will get a license. That's the second piece of this amendment. The other thing it does is it says if a municipality wants to enter into the pre-approval lottery, they're guaranteed to get pre-approval. I support this, the first thing I was talking about, ensuring that if a municipality wants a cannabis business, they get a license. I don't support putting them in the pre-approval process. I don't think it's necessary. By operation of the other part of the amendment that I like, they're kind of pre-approved already. They're going to get a license, so they don't need to be in the pre-approval thing, and it just will slow down and mess up the pre-approval process. So this amendment deletes the part referring to the pre-approval part. If it's adopted, I would encourage members to accept the underlying amendment as well.
Further discussion. Representative Kosnick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Stevensons, I appreciate your clarifying amendment to the amendment, and I encourage members to support the amendment to the amendment.
Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Back to the underlying amendment. Representative Kosnick.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Members, I encourage the adoption of the A23 amendment to help your cities if they choose to participate. Thanks.
Any further discussion to the Kosnick A23 amendment? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House Bill number 4757, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A15.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A15 amendment modifies the ownership requirement for social equity applicants. So in the bill presently, in order to be considered a social equity applicant, you have to hit all these bullet points made up. And then the person who hits all, or the group of people who hit all those bullet points must have at least 65% ownership in the company in order to be determined a social equity applicant. Now, this amendment turns that number from 65 to 51%, which is really what's important. Majority ownership is everything. If you're a 51% owner, you own the company. And that arbitrary 65%, and honestly, I do hope to convince you on this, so please listen. That 65% actually hurts social equity applicants. It genuinely does. Because one thing that we've talked about is, well, social equity applicants don't necessarily have a lot of capital. They don't have a lot of access to people with money. They don't have a lot of money of their own. They might be first-generation immigrants or something like that. So they don't have the $1 to $50 million required to start these businesses. So they need to partner with somebody with capital, an investor who's willing to help them achieve their dreams. The American dream is owning a business. Well, what person, like, just think about it for a second. If I came to you and said, hey, I want to start this business, you know, I don't have any money, but I mean, I can put up maybe $5,000. Would you mind putting up $940,000? And I'll tell you what, you put up, you know, 99% of the money, but I'm willing to give you 35% of the company. No one would do that. No one would do that. So we're going to have a lot of these social equity applicants where this bill helps them with a pre-approval process, which is great, but it doesn't matter if you're pre-approved if nobody's going to give you the money, because you can't expect people to operate businesses solely on charity. There might be a few, but there is no possible way to get a return. Well, there is a possible way, but I cannot imagine somebody putting up hundreds of thousands of dollars. For one, they don't even control the company, even though they put up the majority of the equity. But I'm not even arguing that. I'm saying 51%. But they only can share 35% of the business? That's terrible. It's a massive risk. The majority of these businesses will likely fail in the next 3 years from opening. So when an investor looks at that saying, this is an incredibly dangerous business, it's unlikely to succeed, to be honest, and they can't get a return on their investment or have control of the company, that's something that's not going to happen. So these social equity applicants will be thrilled when they're selected in this pre-approval lottery, and you know what they're going to find? They're going to find nobody's going to give them a dime. There's no incentive. So that is only going to hurt those social equity applicants, which I know is a big focus of your caucus. So 51% gives them the flexibility to basically do a 50-50 split, which is a significant improvement if you're talking about, you know, $1 million in revenue or more, or even $500,000 in revenue. And it gives them the flexibility to, wait, they could even find 2 partners instead of just 1. Because 35%, so say not a lot of people have $1 million to give anyone. I mean, very, very few. So trying to divide up that 35% into 3 people to give you $1 million, that's an even worse deal for them. 51% would give them the flexibility to find multiple partners who still have a legitimate stake in the game. And we can see these new business owners thrive and build a real business rather than run against roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. Because this 65% number is genuinely arbitrary. And so, I know the counter argument that I will hear, unless there's a new one that I haven't heard yet, is like, oh, well, these big bad people with money are going to make predatory contracts, and then they're going to seize control of the business or exploit the social equity applicant in some way. Well, one, as you know in the bill already, they cannot change ownership for the first 3 years of the business, so these predatory contracts would have to wait a long time before they could engage. And 2, the idea of putting it to 65% doesn't help that at all. They can still do these predatory contracts. And for example, so an investor could say, all right, you have to hire me as an employee and pay me $45,000 a year, or you have to hire my son or my wife or my cousin or my brother. And then once you pay them $45,000 a year for X number of years, then my ownership changes. Or they just get a $45,000 salary, don't have to do a lick of work, and also get 35% of the company. It's these predatory contracts are going to happen here and there. They will. But honestly, if the business is successful, it doesn't really matter. But the 65% number doesn't prevent those in any way, shape, or form. There still can happen. There's a million different ways to do it. So let's make it 51%, because 65% only hurts social equity applicants and provides literally no protection whatsoever. And this is one of the few moments in this crazy building where I'm genuinely trying to convince the other side to agree with me here, because I believe I understand your incentives, and this is a better path to get there than what currently exists in the bill. So I urge members' support.
To the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative West, for initiating this conversation. You're right about what my argument against this is going to be, because the data on this is clear. And as we're venturing into uncharted territory in an industry that is new to our state, trying to do it better than every other state has done it, we have to follow the data that we do have. And we know that inadequate ownership percentages like this have been widely abused around the nation. We know that the financial exploitation through this method is a risk for our business owners, because obtaining capital to start a cannabis business is extremely difficult. It is not just about not knowing the right people, it is that our financial institutions are not built to necessarily support folks. And to say that this is the only way social equity applicants will be able to start a business is not accurate. There are many other ways for investors to contribute and profit from cannabis businesses that are not solely based on equity. Investors seeking to support social equity applicants, as was said, and get into business does not have to be centered on owning such a large portion of their business. In our industry, it is widely normal to have royalty agreements, to have debt service loan options, to finance equipment or real estate, staff. There are lots of other ways for investors to engage with social equity applicants in these businesses in ways that are far less antiquated and narrow, and that don't liquidate so much of that business owner's stake in their own company that they are taking all of the risk on. We have seen in other states that the percentages like this are, I don't even think exploited necessarily addresses how deeply predatory these practices have been around the nation. People who have invested any little bit that they do have are then entering into contracts because they want to get into business, thinking they're getting into business with folks who have their best interest in mind, but they do not. And so we must learn from the rest of the country and not fall for this trick. I ask members for a no vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion? The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Representative West, I want to thank you for this idea. There's actually a television show that's predicated on the very same idea that you're talking about. Shark Tank, right? These small businesses that can't raise capital and grow and want to get started and get things moving, they go on television and they go in front of Mr. Wonderful and the rest of the team, and they ask for not a majority interest in those companies. They ask for a minority interest in those companies to provide additional capital to grow those. I think you're onto something, and it must be the American way, because this television show is not only on cable, it's on regular broadcast television, and I think you're trying to help out a group of people who are trying to get into business, although I may not fully agree with the business model that these people are involved with, but I think you're certainly trying to help them out. Are you this chamber's Mr. Wonderful?
Any further discussion? Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. I would love to think of myself as Mr. Wonderful. But what I'd say to Representative Hansen is, I don't believe you addressed how 65% is any better about protecting these social equity applicants. And then you mentioned all the other contracts. And what I would say is, that's harder to understand. Like, you know, if you're thinking about somebody this is their first business, they're not incredibly well versed, it's a lot harder to understand a royalty agreement and all these other ways and the impacts of them. They can understand it, but whoa, if you watch Shark Tank, you know those royalties are where the real money is, and then, hey, you might be stuck in a horrible deal forever. But an equity stake is very easy to understand, and 65% doesn't protect anyone. It doesn't provide any additional protections, and it makes it even harder to raise capital because, well, doing those deals, like in Shark Tank, a lot more deals are done on an equity basis than in these million different categories of how you can structure a deal. And I was thinking your concern was predatory contracts, but it sounds like you're advocating for not saying you're advocating for predatory contracts, but the predatory contracts that are of concern would be maneuvering in that space. So, members, let's help out the social equity applicants and make it so they can raise capital in an easier manner. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A19.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A19 amendment is going to solve a problem that is going to be worse because we killed my early cultivation portion of my earlier amendment, because every single state has been undersupplied when they legalize. We're in the middle of the pack, 23rd state to do it. And right now we have over 100,000 square feet of plant canopy growing in Minnesota. So when you look at, we're not going to help people early cultivate. Well, I'm assuming something will happen eventually, but we're not going to take the fast track that I suggested. We're going to be horrifically undersupplied, which is going to be a big burden on these businesses that are just starting, especially social equity businesses. If there's not product to sell, they can't make money. If they're starting these shops and they can't fill them with product, it's going to be a very substantial issue. And it's going to continue to allow the black market to thrive. So this amendment allows the medical companies to participate in the market for the first 2 years. I know there's a weird aversion on your side of the aisle against medical cannabis companies, but that's why it's only for 2 years. Let's let them participate so they can help solve the undersupply problem, because it likely will be so big they can't, but it would help. I would like to see something of this nature be included in the bill in conference committee. Something that allows them to participate a little more, because I understand we want to make sure they're still taking care of the medical customers, the kids who need their seizure meds, which admittedly is a gaping hole in this amendment, because it allows them to fully participate. And because it's not quite perfectly crafted, I would like to withdraw this amendment.
Representative West withdraws the amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A20.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment changes the definition of social equity applicant, and it also gets rid of the separate lottery and puts everybody in one, because 2 lotteries is kind of inherently unfair and it's confusing. Ideally, I'd like to go back to the scoring system, which we'll talk about at a later time. But one thing that I think we missed broad bipartisan support on is just the definition of social equity applicant. For one of those things is lives in an area of 50% poverty, a census tract with 50% or greater poverty. And it's like, well, I can tell you, who here knows what census tract you live in? I don't know. And if you don't know what, these are things that are hard to understand. Now, sure, the cannabis department will put out some guidelines on this, but these definitions are overly complex. But to me, the main value of social equity applicant, and I've heard this from your side of the aisle, is that, well, let's help people who were harmed by cannabis prohibition. So what I leave in there are people who have been convicted of a cannabis crime or have been convicted or discharged from the military for a cannabis offense. Those people were actually harmed by prohibition. They genuinely were. So you can make the case that, well, you break the law, you break the law. But if you're going to take your mindset of what social equity means, it's like, okay, these people were actually harmed. Well, okay, let's give them preferential treatment. So instead of doing a separate lottery, or we do it, they get 2 entries into the lottery that's everybody else is in. And that's the second part of the bill that I want to introduce as we go into conference committee, is we can have a merit-based system by modifying entries. You can get multiple entries. The better your business is set up, the more capital you have, or in this case, social equity status, because just doing a vetted lottery, it's going to be a disaster. But I don't want to get too much in the lottery. That is for an amendment at a later time. But members, I urge support of this amendment because, well, you can find a lot more agreement on helping people who are actually harmed by cannabis prohibition rather than, well, maybe you lived in a place where, hey, it qualifies, but you never had it impact your life in any way, but somehow you get preferential treatment over other people who also didn't have any negative effects of cannabis prohibition. So the current definition is extremely unfair. This would make it far more legitimate, and I also want to just enter in the idea of multiple entries rather than just meeting minimum standards as we go into conference committee, and I urge members' support.
To the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative West. My friend, I'm going to have to ask for a no vote again on this one. This amendment would really essentially gut some of the most important parts of the rollout of implementation, including, as Representative West mentioned, social equity pre-approved licenses, the definitions, license caps that prevent oversaturation. Oversaturation has been seen, again, according to the data, to cause significant market issues in other states. And the pre-approved licenses are intended to allow a license holder to pursue and secure capital, the real estate, banking, and so many of the other barriers that exist around entrepreneurship. And we have all seen the numbers of the data showing us that there are vast disparities in business ownership. Among business owners, there are fewer people who have experienced and lived in poverty or experienced and lived through the impacts of the war on drugs. There are disproportionately low number of Black, Latin, Asian, and Native business owners nationwide. We also know that prohibition is and has hurt people for nearly a century and far more affected some people more than others. Someone is still today arrested for cannabis every 36 seconds in this country, and nearly 9 out of 10 of those arrests are for possession only. We know that Black people are still 3.6 times more likely to be arrested nationwide, and that number is twice as high, if not more, in some cities in Minnesota. Nationally, 85% of cannabis businesses are owned by white people, while white folks represent less than 60% of the nationwide population. So it's no secret that people who have privilege, people who have access to generational wealth, people with access to education, people who don't and haven't experienced the harms of racism, poverty, over-policing, oppression, that they have an inherent head start in any small business venture, including this one. And this head start really allows them to come into traditional licensing stages far more prepared and right there on the starting line of a brand new billion-dollar industry that is coming our way. The pre-approved licenses give those who don't have that privilege a head start chance to just catch up so that they can start at the same starting line. You know, I was raised to say that to make up what I mess up. And I think this is an important value to consider when we're rolling out a new industry like this. We know that we've made mistakes in this country. We know that we have a lot more work to do to make sure that this is a place where everybody is treated with inherent dignity and worth, border to border, in everywhere and every place that they go. And this amendment seeks to strike some of the very things that we can actually do right now in this industry that will help us and with intention truly begin to turn the ship in a better direction than we have headed in the past. And we can make up a bit of what we have messed up and do the right thing by giving folks that have been most harmed by prohibition, including communities who have experienced deep poverty because we know that they have been over-policed as well, a chance to catch up and have a more equal chance to compete in this industry. So again, I would ask for a no vote. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The one thing I would say is you can put people in a lot worse situation by having somebody go into a business, so say they are extremely impoverished, and then they start a business, and then they go bankrupt. They could end up being a whole lot poorer, and you can do more harm. Now, we agree, well, at least I do, with you about people who have been convicted. I think, yeah, they got a raw deal, let's help them out. But by encouraging these other things, you could be causing more suffering for them, And, of course, it's tremendously unfair. Members, I urge your support.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
West moves to amend House File Number 4757, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A18.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative West.
You know, I'm getting annoyed of hearing my own voice right now already. So sorry about that. Yeah, I know. So the A18 amendment essentially gets rid of this lottery and returns to the original bill that was passed last year that had the scoring merit-based system. Now, this is important because when we passed that bill, rational people were thinking, okay, if I want to participate in this market, I have to get going quickly because everyone knows the early businesses are the ones that actually succeed. So people got moving. They understood they were taking some risks if they were making some investments. But one thing that might surprise people is when government passes a system for getting an application, for participating in a system, and then the next year, they completely change the rules. Imagine how frustrating that would be if you were somebody who made an investment or even just got your ducks in a row. But this isn't even just about that. Because, I mean, this is operating under a cloak of confusion that is making it impossible for people to make choices. Because now we're debating this lottery system. Who knows if the lottery system even survives through conference? We don't know how it's going to go. Nobody knows how it's going to go. We passed a law that now we're just completely changing. It's no way to govern. We can't be passing these things and then fixing them later. And when you think about fixing something later, as that was discussed when the bill was passed last year, that doesn't mean completely changing everything. Changing the way licenses are distributed is probably the biggest change you could possibly make on the bill. It's literally the businesses that will operate in the space. So let's get back to the merit-based system, because with the lottery, you know, I know the verbiage changed calling it a vetted lottery, but so say you want to study an environmental plan, or a wastewater plan, or a ventilation plan, a cultivation plan. You can't evaluate any of these things without a property where this business will go, which is also disposed of in this bill. So the lottery is, even if it is completely incapable of vetting people. It really is. It can provide for some minimum standards, a business plan on the back of a napkin that says you have money, and who knows if you do, because that won't be verified. It doesn't require property. It doesn't actually evaluate things really important, like a security plan, because we know this is a high theft, high crime business that's predominantly done in cash. People need some certainty. And the idea that we're just going to completely nuke the system is fundamentally unfair. And when you go to a lottery, you make it so we end up with random, literally by definition, random people. All they do is put their name in a hat and then you go. There are minimum standards, but for example, as I already mentioned, you can't evaluate so many of these things that would tell you whether this business is even going to come remotely close to succeeding. So we need to return to sanity here. And if you accepted my earlier amendment on social equity definitions, I know a big reason why you went to a lottery is because you are anticipating a lawsuit and you want to make sure that only one lottery goes down instead of the whole system. Well, if you took my amendment on social equity, I guarantee you that would stand against legal challenge and you would help people who have been harmed. But we can fix that later. There's still conference. By adopting this amendment, we can ensure that the businesses that start at the beginning are the best businesses that our state has to offer. You can even still figure out a way to prioritize people who are actually harmed by cannabis prohibition and ensure that We're in a market with cultivators who can cultivate, retailers who can sell, and people who can operate these businesses. Because if it is done with names in a hat with these minimum standards, it is going to be a train wreck. Not to mention, so with the lottery, it's also, when you get your name pulled out of the hat, you have that license for 18 months. And I appreciate the majority for taking my amendment to at least not allow that to be extended. But so you get this lottery, 18 months you have to utilize it. That is a long time. So say you're a retailer who has everything lined up and you're a very competent person, you win the lottery, you go set up your business, you're like, yes, here we go, time to achieve the American dream. But half the cultivators haven't figured out how to purchase a building or turn the lights on, and there's nothing to sell. Not to mention that there's already going to be an undersupply, but say by the luck of the draw, because that is exactly what happens with the lottery, the luck of the draw, you could end up with a litany of people who got their cultivator license and have no idea how to cultivate. Now it says, oh, we're going to go by experience, we're going to go by all these minimum standards, but minimum standards are just that. Minimum. You are getting the bottom of the barrel, and who knows, some good ones too. But you don't know because you can't evaluate these businesses. So, changing to a lottery, one, tremendously unfair because we told people the rules and then we just dropped a bomb on them and decided, well, let's go with this completely different set of rules that is now all minimum standards, so there's no reason to try and compete. You just meet the minimum standards, and then if you get a license, well, then you figure out whether you can achieve that scope of businesses. So in a point system, we don't have the problem of a straw buyer, which was brought up, a straw applicant, which was brought up earlier. You don't have that risk because these are evaluated. And you go, well, this person definitely has no clue. And okay, well, say they lie on their application and they also somehow get through. Well, in the bill already, if you lie in your application, you're done, period. And that will be discovered, especially because this is a very difficult business to operate in. So members, let's not mess with people. Let's get back to what it was. I understand that because of that social equity provision, that this, if it were passed exactly like this and signed into law, it would be illegal, but you should have taken my previous amendment that would have solved that issue. But we also can resolve that in conference committee. So let's be fair and be smart. If we want a functioning operation, we need the best working there. And actually evaluating businesses has a lot higher chance of getting the best than drawing names out of a hat. I urge members' support.
To the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you again, Representative West, for initiating this conversation. You know, modifying our state's policies to reflect the data as we have it is really important. Making data-informed decisions matters. Again, as I said before, we are operating in somewhat of uncharted territory, learning bits and pieces from other states around the country to figure out what they messed up and what we can do better and the harms we can avoid. And, you know, that's what this proposed change reflects. You know, I also, as Representative Stevenson said, we already, and don't propose to change, that when we're selecting licenses, if we have too many license applicants than our licenses available, it's a lottery. And nobody is proposing changing that piece of it. So I think it's important to understand that we are already using a lottery system in a part of our current statutes. We also know that well-vetted lotteries have fewer opportunities for subjectivity, which we also know that's where bias lives and thrives, is in subjectivity. We have so many levers and guardrails built into our statutes that other states didn't do. And that gives us an advantage to make sure that we can learn from the mistakes of other states that have less than adequate lottery systems. I am always on the side of looking at a policy, and if it is inadequate, not recommending we do that here in Minnesota. There are some lottery systems across this country that are terrible. And we should be really critical of those and look at them. But we should also at the same time not forget to look at the other guardrails that we have in our Constitution, in our bill and in our other rulemaking procedures that are different than other states. And so I'm going to ask for a no vote on this. And like I mentioned on the last amendment, these license selection criteria are really critical tools to ensure that we aren't ignoring the runway that people who have had a head start in business and in society from the start. We can't ignore that. And so rather than going over all of the points I already made about the importance of getting it right and making sure everybody can start from the same starting line, I will simply ask you for a no vote on this.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I wouldn't say it's uncharted waters because there are over 20 states that have done this. The waters are charted. There's a lot of boats. As you mentioned, there's a lot of things to learn from what other states have done. Over 20 states, some states have very thriving markets, particularly states without social equity provisions. So we know what's going on. It's not uncharted waters. This could have been done so much faster, but trying to navigate how to ham-fist social equity provisions in here and not get sued for their discriminatory nature does take a lot of finagling, I do admit. And that is a chief factor in the delay. And the reason nobody advocates against the lottery that was already in it is because you're talking about a lottery of all these people who scored highly in the scoring process. You're talking about a lottery among truly qualified applicants rather than a lottery from minimum standard applicants. So it's that argument I don't believe stands. I would say logic and reason are definitely on my side in this situation. So please, members, let's be reasonable and pragmatic. Let's not get caught up in some ideology. Let's focus on providing Minnesotans a safe and legal market as soon as possible and give people some clarity and consistency, which we seem to struggle with greatly in the state of Minnesota. So members, I urge you to support this amendment, and let's allow people to actually be evaluated rather than just pulling names out of a hat.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend House File Number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A24.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. The A24 amendment really just puts on par the products of gummies with a lot of the other products that are being controlled when it comes to the flavor of them. We've got bills in front of us that are talking about eliminating the flavor of vaping, of cigarettes, and this would put gummies in that same genre. And that's what the bill does, and very straightforward, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I encourage members to vote no on this amendment. As Representative Swazinski said, and just to be clear, this amendment only applies to edibles. It does not apply to products that are smoked or inhaled. There's no flavor ban on smoking or inhaling in the underlying bill as well. So if this amendment goes on, you're going to have a situation where you can't have flavors in edibles but can have them in smoked and inhaled products, which doesn't make a lot of sense. In addition, it would overnight basically ban all of the THC seltzers that are out there. I don't believe there's any THC seltzer on the market that doesn't have any added flavoring. These seltzers are keeping a lot of our breweries afloat right now, as you will hear from them, are incredibly popular with the public. This amendment would functionally ban them all, so I would encourage a no vote on the amendment.
To the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the Swazinski amendment. I spent a lot of time working on this issue last year, and I think it's so important that we eliminate the flavors from edibles, and to Chair Stevenson's point, also to anything that can be smoked or vaped. These products are designed to attract children, and they cause incredible harm. The flavors are things that are attractive to kids. strawberry, different cereal type flavors, different Sour Patch candy type flavors. And that is just making them even more enticing for our kids. And the gummies are easy for kids to get their hands on and be confused about what they are. And I just think if they tasted without the sweet flavor or the interesting flavor and just tasted like actual marijuana, that would make them less attractive to kids. So I strongly support this. I think we have much more work to do on this. I'd like to see the flavor ban for all smoking and vaping as well, but this is a good start and we should absolutely vote yes on this.
Further discussion on the amendment. Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, Representative Severson spoke pretty eloquently that this would have a pretty broad brush. And I think that is an important, if we're having this conversation on the House floor, if you're concerned about youth use, there is no greater connection. The argument across with some members has been that, well, with cigarettes, if it's flavored, it's going to attract kids. Well, there is no kid cigarette. There is no kid marijuana to smoke. But there is candy that is marketed to children. Candy and juice and bubbler currently being used by kids. This is saying that if that is a concern of yours, if you are concerned of using like products to target kids, this is about a softball, slow pitch, underhand, home run hitting amendment that you could possibly get. I mean, this thing is legit as it gets. If your goal is to legitimately curb usage, then curb actual candy flavored THC products. I mean, this should be your baseline. If you're thinking of doing other things when it comes to flavor bans, candy flavored THC products, gummies, gummy worms, should be an easy foundation to build your argument. Please give me a green vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. No. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House Bill number 4757, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A25.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment, well, let me back up. Last year when the bill was passed, I don't think many people in this chamber understood that for all intents and purposes, the bill that was passed legalized cannabis for underage youth. This was brought to my attention during the middle of the summer, and I wrote a letter saying we needed to go into special session to fix this so that our youth are not exposing themselves to these products. Because as we all know, was it August, I think, that the ability to legally possess and grow your own became law. And my concern, in addition to the effects that this is going to have on a youth's health, their brain, their overall health, as we've talked about already with the previous amendment, was that the black market that's being set up now, because there's this 2-year gap between legalizing homegrown stuff and the commercial market, was going to allow the black market to, guess what, hire youth to be their deliverers of the goods. And here's why. Because the default penalty last year, and current law even still says, is a petty misdemeanor with with the highest level of penalty can only be $300. $300. That will not be a deterrent enough to prevent youth from getting their hands on, possessing, and selling, and being used as sellers for the black market cannabis that's happening right now. So what this amendment does, members, is it raises that default from being a petty misdemeanor to a misdemeanor. And then if they are unlawfully selling it, that's for possession. If they're unlawfully selling it, it raises it to a gross misdemeanor, whereas it's just a misdemeanor now. Folks, it was acknowledged last summer when I sent that letter by the Senate author of the cannabis legalization bill that it was intentional to decriminalize it for youth. Let me quote what Senator Port said in a MinnPost article. It was intentional when asked about the apparent decriminalization of underage use of marijuana, said Lindsay Port, DFL Burnsville. The best way to get young people to use cannabis less is to use real money to educate them in ways that they can hear. Would Representative O'Driscoll yield to a question, Madam Chair? Speaker.
Representative O'Driscoll will yield to a question. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, I know that you are the Republican lead on the Commerce Committee. Could you tell me a little bit about the Commerce Bill? And I understand there's a negative target there, and so where were some of the places that they were looking to get money from in order to meet that target?
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Scott, to your question. There are actually two bills that we had, the policy bill, which we voted off the House floor here within the last 7 days, and then yesterday for the final committee meeting, we took up a small finance bill, and it had a negative target of somewhere between, I don't remember the exact number, about $5.5 million. And what had happened was the bill author, who is the same bill author of that bill as the bill author of the bill that's before us, State Representative Stevenson, had a DE amendment that took money from all the different cannabis sources that were monies out there for things like poison control, prevention, youth education, and different things, and kind of called some of that money together and put it into the Office of Cannabis Management.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative O'Driscoll continue to yield?
Representative O'Driscoll will continue to yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, so what you're saying is the money that was intended for grants for youth education, that pot of money was being taken from to put in the overall larger Office of Cannabis Management?
Representative O'Driscoll.
Generally, thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Scott, generally your interpretation is correct. Because there was no new money that was brought to the table, existing appropriations were then reduced as a result of this. And I actually did bring an amendment to the committee to try to, once again, not necessarily restore back to the full dollar amount for the prevention programs for youth, but at least trying to put more money to that cause. And we had quite a debate on the concept, and as a matter of fact, the bill author and the chair of the committee, and again, the author of this, Representative Stevenson, the bill that's before us today, committed that he would look to try to find us a way to get more money back into those youth prevention programs. And the bill has two more stops, one on the Ways and Means Committee and one here on the House floor. And as a matter of fact, I was so concerned about that, I asked the acting director of Cannabis Management to come forward to get a commitment from them that they would in earnest look at trying to find a way to put more money into youth programs on this. I have seen a theme that's developed from the DFL side of the aisle this year in other bills about youth protection. In the labor bill, there were a lot of laws that were passed that strengthened the labor laws, making higher penalties for youth who are employed in areas that are not approved for youth, or further clarifying what kinds of jobs and careers youth can be involved in. As a matter of fact, I had an amendment that was on the liquor bill to allow 17-year-olds to serve liquor, and I was told that that was inappropriate, in so many words, an inappropriate use of the minor's time and asking a minor to do do something along that line. So I'm getting a little bit of a conflicting information when in some bills in some areas we're saying yes, and then in yesterday's conversation it was no, we're going to take some money from that. And then hearing your statement today that the bill author on the Senate side had said that it was deliberate to expose youth to this and then reducing the amount of money that's on here. I know your amendment looks to try to strengthen that and put on the same par as other alcohol, tobacco, and substances that youth may do. We just passed a bill here not all that many years ago, and I think about it, that you got to be at least 21 to purchase, and there were some fines that were associated with that, again, in the name of protecting youth. Not sure if that's what you're looking for, Representative Scott, but that's what I've got for you this afternoon.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative O'Driscoll, for that update from Commerce. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Members, making this substance legal for underage kids is harmful to the kids. It's harmful. The parents don't want this. They have enough battles to fight right now. We have a mental health crisis among our youth. And we've already seen studies that show the effect of increased incidences of psychosis among young people that use cannabis. And members, we need to take a strong look at protecting our kids in this state. We're getting away from it. If we have a labor law that says a 17-year-old can't even hand somebody at a restaurant a beer, then we certainly shouldn't be allowing them to consume, possess, and even sell, with only a slap on the wrist, cannabis and cannabis products. I would ask for a roll call on this amendment and ask for member support.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I feel like it is important to correct what is incorrectly being stated right now. And the bill last year did not legalize cannabis for kids. It is not lawful for children to possess marijuana. It is the same as it is for alcohol. So I just want to make that very clear. I know that was the intent of both the bill author in the House and the bill author of the Senate. The bill that we're debating today, not the amendment here, but the bill itself, is about regulations. It is not within the scope of the Public Safety Committee, the bill that we're debating today. Although the amendment that's being offered would put it within the scope of the Public Safety Committee. We did not hear this provision. We did not hear the bill again because it is a regulation bill, not a public safety bill. The amendment that's being offered today was not even offered as a standalone bill. There has been no stakeholder engagement on the amended language that's being proposed here. And the penalties that we placed in the bill last year were carefully crafted. Again, want to say it is not legal for children to possess or sell cannabis. And there is no reason why we need to change the carefully crafted language that we did last year. And for all those reasons, I'm going to recommend members vote no.
Further discussion on the Scott amendment. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Moeller, if it wasn't intentional, then why did the Senate author tell in a MinnPost article to the reporter there that it was intentional? It was intentional. Those three words came out of her mouth. Came out of her mouth. Members, a $300 fine that rarely gets charged. I could ask some folks in law enforcement around here how often, a petty misdemeanor when it concerns a minor even gets charged. And I can tell you what the answer is going to be. Rarely, if ever. So for all intents and purposes, you know it, we know it. This bill that was passed last year legalized cannabis for minors. Please vote yes on the amendment.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely?
Carol. Is she doing? Athena. I'll call Daniels. Daniels.
Daniels, yes.
Daniels votes aye. Carol.
There you go.
Daniels. Daniels, yes. Daniels votes aye.
It's a tape.
That's the lag, sorry.
It's a tape.
Go ahead.
Carol.
Ned, go ahead.
Carol, no.
Carol votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 64 yeas and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4757, as amended.
Third reading. The member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, oh, she's not there. The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just quickly here, I wanted to touch on a key point that I think that is important for the body. I'm not going to kind of get into the whole of the policy at all, but I did have a question that I wondered if Representative O'Driscoll could yield to.
Representative O'Driscoll will yield to the question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, looking at this bill, it came through the Commerce Committee of which you and I sit. I wanted to find out, based upon the conversation in that Commerce Committee and the underlying bill language, is there any language to protect Minnesotans and our taxpayers by ensuring that our dollars aren't going to out-of-state corporations or nonprofits?
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Schultz, I know this is something that you have brought up a number of times in committee. There is no explicit language in here, but I know that the person who has probably better knowledge on it is probably the bill author, Representative Stevenson. That might be more of an appropriate question for the bill author.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll ask, will Representative Stevenson yield?
Representative Stevenson will yield for a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Stevenson, I remember our conversation in committee around this topic in particular. As you know, I brought an amendment, and I wanted to see, would you have openness and willingness to find a solution that ensures that our dollars are being spent with Minnesotans and Minnesota corporations and nonprofits?
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Schultz. Always willing to have a conversation. As we discussed in committee, while the bill last year created a number of grant programs, most of those grant programs are not within the jurisdiction of the Office of Cannabis Management. They're mostly in deed and other locations and are better addressed through those committee processes rather than ours. This bill, underlying bill, doesn't make any changes to eligibility for those various grant programs. So I don't think this bill is the vehicle for the discussion you want to have, but I'm always open to conversation.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think it kind of runs the gamut of conversations here at the Capitol that when there are tax dollars at play, when we're setting up grant programs, loan programs, that when we set up those programs, eligibility requirements should be strong, they should be stringent, and they should ensure that they are benefiting Minnesotans. And I think that's really key and important. And I encourage, as this bill moves forward and as more conversations are had around cannabis in our state, that we ensure that our dollars are being spent and supporting Minnesotans. Thank you.
To the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to say thank you to Representative Stevenson and Representative Hansen for engaging in a thoughtful discussion. Not so much here, but prior to here, I very much appreciate our conversations trying to make the bill functional. And I know deep down in your hearts, you know I'm right. This bill does some good, but it really doesn't fix much of anything on what's not going to work in the cannabis bill. It does triple backflip handstands to try and shoehorn ideological positions that are not about a safe and functioning marketplace, but are about political ideologies. And we should be focused on a safe and regulated market for Minnesotans, because that's the whole point of cannabis legalization, is to allow people to have a safe, tested product, because they're getting it anyway as it stands now. Now, I understand why you had to shove the bill through the process with glaring holes, because you didn't want the cannabis parties to be on the ballot all over again, and you're really worried about the election. And that's okay. Yeah, political considerations are always number one here. So you had to shove the bill through. But I did have a lot higher hopes for these fixes, because it was said repeatedly, like, okay, we're getting this through, we're going to deal with the problems later. The problems in that bill still exist today, and we need to be pragmatic. All this political ideology is going to result in an embarrassing outcome. So people have now legalized possession. They were on like day one of the bill, or August 1st, after the bill was passed last year. But there's no place to buy a legal product with no place to buy it legally. But there actually was a place you could buy it legally, but it wasn't intended by the bill, whereas a lot of these hemp shops started selling marijuana, or at least hemp flower. And so, well, people lined up and they got their product. Honestly, I think a lot of Minnesotans thought that legalization had happened. But no, legalization is still far, far in the future. Only possession was legalized. So people were able to go to these stores, and then as the Department of Health and the Office of Cannabis started going on, well, then suddenly they were pulled off the shelves at all these hemp stores. And it's like, well, I get that's what the law says, but it only goes to show having a legal, something that is made legal and no place to legally buy it is an obvious problem. And the longer that kind of situation exists, the more the black market will become entrenched. And that puts people at risk. Well, as THC is not lethal, THC itself is not dangerous, there are examples of people going to the black market and buying something that isn't just marijuana. And that is the point of ending the prohibition of cannabis. So people have a safe and regulated place to buy it, rather than doing what they were already doing. Because we know, even in a Catholic school, I guarantee you, there was a weed dealer there. So, I appreciate you taking some of my amendments and Representative Scott's amendments and most of Representative Koznick's amendments, but the most important thing that I really thought should have gone, I'm surprised, and I think many activists in the community, many people who support you are also surprised that you're not taking early cultivation more seriously. You're just dragging your feet, even though we've known about this problem from the beginning of legalization. We need to grow immediately, as soon as immediately as possible, because, again, the point is a safe and regulated place. You're not taking it seriously, I would argue. It's going to be, we're lucky if by 2026 at this present rate. You have no idea how long rulemaking is going to take. And sure, it started, but things have a habit of taking longer than you expect. You should have accepted my amendment for early cultivation. And honestly, You know, as somebody who supported the bill last year, I am very concerned. You know, it's going to be embarrassing at the present rates. The things won't function. It'll be a total disaster. The black market will continue to thrive, and we'll see almost no benefit from cannabis legalization. And I am worried. I think you all should be a little more worried because this bill doesn't fix it. Doesn't fix much. It does fix a little bit. Why is it a legal product to possess, but not a legal product to buy? Well, let's make sure that people can do it safely by getting going. What I see, we're going to run into an awful launch as it stands now. This bill isn't solving very many problems. I'm hoping we can solve a lot of problems in conference committee. But it looks like it's the Titanic sailing through. You sent it offshore thinking your blueprints and plans were fine. And now you can see this giant iceberg of undersupply, a thriving black market. No place for people to be legal. And you're just ever so slightly altering course, when what's needed is a hard turn. So, in conference committee, you got to do early cultivation. You have to help the department, give them clarity. Thank you for taking part of that amendment, but as it stands now, this bill is inadequate. And I think you'd agree. I bet you it'll look a lot different when it comes out. So, let's be serious. Let's take off our ideological partisan goggles and just try and do good government for Minnesotans. And I'm sure the department would appreciate a focus on a pragmatic solution rather than an ideological solution. So members, sadly, because this bill fixes very little, I would not recommend a green vote. Vote red. Thanks.
To the author of the bill, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Encourage members to vote yes today. This bill, which makes a number of good changes to our cannabis law. I look forward to the conference committee discussions and continued work on this bill, particularly the provisions surrounding the proposals changes to the lottery, which I know a lot of people are thinking about and working on, and we're still very open to conversation on that provision in particular, and think that there could be a lot of work done on that provision in particular, and wanted to be sure to mention that. And with that, members, I'd ask for a yes vote.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Ready? Will the clerk call the names of the members voting remotely?
Carol.
There you go.
Carol, yes.
Carol votes aye. Daniels.
Daniels, no.
Daniels votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 yeas and 62 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.